everybody, I'm John Largent, founder and CEO of Largent Media, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I come from a digital media and production agency, and on behalf of Eskin Eskin Fundraising Training, it's my pleasure and privilege to welcome you to this webcast being taped in collaboration with TVSA, San Antonio's public access station. This program will be broadcast to TVSA's audience. We're also proud to make it available through Constant Contact and social media for our growing learning community of professionals and volunteer nonprofit leaders nationwide, composed of CEOs, executive directors, directors of development, other staff, board members, donors, and friends of the magnificent nonprofit community that every day touches, improves, and saves more lives. We need to make it clear that on the onset of this particular recording, it's not interactive, and so you'll not have the opportunity to ask questions like you normally would in a traditional Eskin training webcast. You know, one of the perks of my career is being able to interact and engage with professionals in all walks of life, business, sports, education, medicine, and people that have distinguished themselves in their careers. And working with Jim Eskin, we've been partners and friends for a long time. I don't know of anybody more committed, dedicated, and passionate about the world of fundraising and training others to ask for those dollars than Jim Eskin. Typically, our format is Jim interviewing other people, but today we flipped the script and I'm going to be interviewing him. And Jim's wealth of wisdom as a practitioner, consultant, and prolific writer and author includes a monthly newsletter with hundreds of guest columns and blogs in 2 books. So I have the privilege of asking Jim these questions this week. So why don't we go ahead and get started?
Okay.
Jim, let's start from square one.
Yeah.
Why are so many professionals and executives afraid to ask for money?
Well, in all candor, if they weren't, I can assure you there'd be a lot more unemployed fundraising professionals, present company included. But seriously, you know, when you think about fear, John, most of fear is based on the unknown. I mean, death is the greatest fear because none of us know what happens. And the frustrating part for me is there are so many nonprofit leaders that really have not experienced a genuine solicitation. And I'm amazed how many haven't. They're familiar with something called getting money as opposed to asking money. Now, don't get me wrong, getting money is better than no money at all, but it looks very different. When the donor self-directs the gift, they determine the amount, the purpose, and the timing. And when the nonprofit intentionally asks for the gifts, we can determine the amount, the purpose, and the timing.
Jim, what have you found to be effective ways to have people overcome or empower them to overcome their fear of asking for the funds?
First of all, you can say it's completely normal to feel intimidated by asking for a gift. It's not something to be ashamed of. And I like to gather boards together and go around the room and ask them, what are you afraid of? And hear from their peers, how did they overcome? Not just hear it from the instructor, myself. How did they overcome it? Okay. Number 2, you got to keep in mind that they're not asking for yourself. You're asking for something bigger and grander. You're asking for something that you're passionate about, something you can believe that will really improve the world. Number 3, hearing no is not the end of the world. We have had fundraising in what's now America since 1643. That little institution called Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts started the first annual fund appeal in 1643.
Wow.
And guess what? That getting a head start works because now they have an endowment of about $51 billion. A couple of other practical ways. We like to role play. I'm amazed how many nonprofit leaders go in and they kind of almost wing it. You know, they wouldn't do that for other big projects. Now, you don't have to have a word-for-word script, though I've got to be guilty. I've written those. But you should have a very clear sense of who's going to open the meeting, who's going to present the case for support, and who's going to make the ask. Okay? Mm-hmm. And finally, I like butting up people where somebody who's new to fundraising accompanies either a professional staff or a board member who's comfortable with making the ask, and they go along and see how it's done. And guess what? You can hear yes, no, or I need more time. In all three instances, the sun's going to come up the next day.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's one. Having known you for a while, I know you have led advancement teams at three institutes of higher learning. What are some of the things you've learned to overcome that sense of fear to ask for donations to advance those universities?
Well, I had the best of both worlds, you know, and I pivoted in my career, you know, from public relations to fundraising. And I was around 40, so I never asked for a gift until I was about 40. And I worked for a dean at a university college of business. He was a master. He was at the end of his 13 years of deanship. I got to see him. I was the tag-along, and I got to see him do it over and over again. I knew word by word. I knew exactly the second, you know, he was going to make the ask. He was such a master. And with one exception, the first time we asked for $1 million gift, he said, Jim, I want you to do this, okay? He said he can do a lot more for your career than mine. Guess what? He was right. Now, my next dean, it was his first deanship, okay? And he loved to talk. He loved to talk to donors. He could never get around for asking for the gift. And so I got to do it well over 100 times, and he had a way of talk, and we had a signal. He'd shift his eyes towards me, and, you know, I think the method is always to you know, learn it, do it, and then do it better over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that a long time ago that practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. So that's what you've been doing. There you go. Yeah, one of the things that I've heard you say over the years, and one of your favorite sayings, is when you're soliciting to ask for a gift, you're having to choose not between the good and the bad, but the good and the good. Can you tell me about how people that are in a place to make a donation, how do they overcome the hurdle on what to choose between the good and the good?
Well, for the nonprofit leader, I think that's one of they're afraid of the ask. I think they have to think long and hard. What can they say that all these other good causes can't say? Because you said exactly what I've said a million times. It's not a choice between the good and the bad, but between the good and the good. So how do you stand out? And more to the point, how do you align with the donors, their values, their priorities, and their needs? And how can your mission speak directly to those three priorities in their life?
Yeah. Well, I've got some statistics here I want to share with you. There are more than 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States, and overwhelmingly majority, like 90%, have annual budgets of less than $1 million a year. How can this vast majority of small and modest-sized organizations compete for donor dollars with well-established household name charitable organizations?
Well, first of all, they can. And they actually enjoy several advantages where a gift, I think it's a good gift, say $25,000 or $50,000, that's a big deal. That's why when a bartender rings the bell after a good tip. Well, that's a big deal for that small to modest-sized nonprofit. At some of these super large nonprofits, I got to tell you, it's just another gift.
Yeah.
Okay, so they can really concentrate, and they can make the person feel like a real hero for making a gift that's a lot less than at the big institutions. And their gifts of, say, $25,000, $50,000 can really move the needle in that nonprofit as far as, implementing its mission.
Yeah. As far as community involvement, I know a lot of board members on charitable organizations don't have any experience, and getting them to increase the visibility of the organization that they're involved with can be a challenge from time to time. Talk to us about how you involve those nonprofit entities that are volunteering their time to step up and bring more visibility and just more engagement to their organization.
Well, that's very important. I think too many people think that the ask is the only significant part of the gifting continuum. And that's far from the truth. It's actually just one moment. And you got to do all the other parts. And the other parts are discovery, cultivation, and then the solicitation, and then stewardship. And so you can have a board member or a committee member, or a volunteer or a staff member contribute mightily to fundraising results without ever asking for a gift. Again, they can identify likely donors from their network of personal and professional and civic contacts.
I think you hit the nail on the head there with the network.
Right, and we all have networks, Some look different than others. They can break the ice. They can make introductions. We call it cultivation, is forging a personal and emotional bond between, and that's where I think the ball game is won and lost, between the donor and the nonprofit. And finally, they can play, I love getting people, reluctant fundraisers, involved in what we call the stewardship phase, and that's where they express thanks. That could be a phone call with no other agenda than saying thanks. And you might be leaving, by the way, a voicemail, and that's fine. Guess what? With a voicemail, someone can pick it up and replay it over and over again.
That's right.
And when it's time to make the ask, you can leave it to the professional staff and the board members who are comfortable with that process. They can step in and make the ask. But the other folks can play huge roles in discovery, cultivation, and stewardship. It's far more than just the solicitation.
Well, one of the things that I always kind of marvel at is how much money is out there, how much is available, and how much people want to give. What are some of the most effective ways to, whether it's a gala or whether it's a car wash, or no matter what it is, what are some of the most cost-effective and effective ways to raise money?
Well, we all have biases, and I have a bias, okay? I am someone who likes to concentrate on major gifts, and that's where you're going to spend more time with the largest donors in your donor circle, okay, your donor pool. Okay, and that's going to be different for every organization, but you're going to concentrate your efforts there. And keep in mind, last year, $557 billion of private money was contributed to nonprofits. 2/3 of that came from individuals. Now, don't get me wrong, I love getting money from corporations and foundations, but I like fishing, where the fish are biting, and that's in the pool of individual donors. The other thing I've discovered is that individuals tend to make up their minds a lot quicker than corporations and foundations. Now, I have to admit too, I'm not crazy about special events. I really don't think donors want to go to another gala, another golf tournament, another luncheon. They want to support the cause, okay? And typically, by the way, almost half of the money raised goes to cover the cost of that special event when you have, a gala or a golf tournament or a luncheon, with one exception. Now, if you have a signature special event that has a long established history and you can make it happen and sponsors automatically renew, and it's not going to consume a lot of staff time, I'll say okay, but again, as far as efficiency, it's working one-on-one with your largest donors, okay? And that can be different. You know, in some smaller nonprofits, that could be someone getting $50,000. A larger nonprofit, someone getting 6 figures. Or even larger, someone getting 7 figures. But you invest, you know, the biggest investment is time of leadership to nurture friendships. Notice I said friendships and not relationships. You know, friendships is something that's a lot deeper and sustains over time. To me, relationship is more of a transactional definition. And we want friendships because we're talking about, we just don't want one gift from John Largent. We want a lifetime of gifts as the friendship grows closer and closer over time and the amount of the gifts increase over time.
And wouldn't you say, just on this last point, wouldn't you say too that any amount that's given, if it's given over time, is appreciated as if a one-time gift because you're building that friendship with that donor?
I'm glad you brought that up. You know, the statistics tell us if we can keep a donor for about 2 or 3 years, we got them for life. You know, you lose a lot in the first year. And so you should, you know about the principle of compounded interest, you should think about lifetime donor value. And if John starts with a gift of $1,000 and you do a good job of recognizing him and sharing with him through facts, figures, and compelling personal stories, there's a good chance you can go back and he can climb the ladder to a gift of $2,500, $5,000, and so on.
Yeah, that's a great point. We had a really unique point in our time as a country just a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's mostly in our windshield, in our back windshield. But COVID-19 really upended not only general industries, but had a real impact in the nonprofit world. Tell me, what were some of the pivot points or some of the things that nonprofits did to work with, around, through COVID-19?
Well, you know, seasoned fundraising practitioners like myself, we were rigidly schooled that major gifts had to be asked eyeball to eyeball, no exceptions. And of course, COVID and the pandemic struck and social distancing, and we were handcuffed. And we discovered that screen-to-screen solicitations could work, particularly with those you already had established relationships with, okay, and had giving histories. And so we saw, lo and behold, we were getting a lot of gifts instead of eyeball to eyeball, screen to screen.
Yeah, that goes into my next question, in that now there are so many ways to prospect potential donors. It's not just door to door. It's not just a telephone call. It's social media.
Yeah.
It's email. It's TikTok. It's all these different things that are happening now. What's your advice to nonprofits on how to wade through the minutia of all those different things that are happening to be more effective in their prospecting?
Well, you know, there is an excess of riches, you know, of ways to communicate with donor prospects. And like anything else, you got to really get to know your donor prospect. What are their personal preferences when it comes to communications? Do they like informal meetings? You know, do they like telephone calls? I think we tend to overlook the power of a cell phone. Do they like video conferencing? You know, I mean, there's some talk of computer screen fatigue, but some people like it because of the convenience. Do they like email? Do they like text? Do they like social media? That's part of our process in really getting to know the donor prospect. How do they like to communicate? Yeah. And probably there's no magic bullet. You know, to reach the donor prospect, you have to deliver the message on multiple occasions through multiple media. So I like to take a hybrid approach, putting together different pieces to reinforce each message. I once heard you have to tell someone a message 17 times before it sinks in.
Yeah. In those nonprofits that are successful in raising money, who is putting the big oars in the water to make those things happen?
Well, I'll tell you this. If you think it can be solely delegated to the director of development or the professionals, that nonprofit, you're wrong, and it's going to come up short of the goal. I like to say it takes an entire nonprofit village. And remember, there's a lot more than just Eskin. And everybody else in the nonprofit village, and that's the, management, the board, the volunteers, the other donors, they might not ask for gifts, but they can do the very important thing of spreading the story. Again, what makes this nonprofit stand out? And they can share data, facts, figures, and particularly personal testimonials.
Yeah. As an offshoot of COVID, we've done together. I've been with you since day one on creating these webinars and webcasts and things. You've done over 250 of those.
Right.
What are some of the pros and cons of in-person versus doing what we've been doing virtually over the last few years?
Yeah. Don't tell my wife, but I'm like a man with two lovers, okay? I mean, I love the in-person workshops, okay, where I could see the eyeballs of the audience. I know when I had them. I know when I didn't have them. And I, for one, don't like to ask for a show of hands. I like calling on people. Yep. I love that type of interaction. And I think really the audience liked it too. And if they wanted to pass, that was fine. So there was that type of contact, okay? Now, what we discovered, even our great workshops for COVID, most people were spending more time, this is just a local, workshop, to drive and get home than the time of the actual workshop. It wasn't very time efficient. Now, let alone out-of-town conferences, you got to multiply the time and expense of those. So they're really not efficient, and that's what I love about the virtual format. There is so much efficiency. Nobody I know seems to have enough time.
Yeah.
And that's what the virtual format does. It saves you time. You can do it from home or anywhere. You can watch it on demand, and you can replay it.
Yeah, and the attendees come not from just your local area, but from literally all over the world. We've had people from Israel, from Scotland, from Australia. They've all attended your webinars because of the access of being virtual.
Our hope is, I've talked to people who used to come to our live workshops and now have participated in our virtual programs, is they miss seeing who else is there. And they miss the opportunity to network. So looking forward to 2025, I look forward to working with you that we can bring together the best of both worlds, that we can bring the efficiency and convenience of virtual communication, but also let the attendees see who else is participating, and also give them an opportunity to network by maybe moving into private chat rooms after the program.
Yeah. Well, we're here because you have written your second book, but I want to talk about your first book, 10 Simple Fundraising Lessons.
Yeah.
Give me a synopsis of this book. I've read it. I'm not a nonprofit, and I enjoyed it. So tell us about that.
I like hearing that. Give me a fist bump. The thing I once heard that fundraising really, more than anything else, is based on common sense. And believe me, as a practitioner inside 3 institutions of higher education, the more you kept it simple and relied on your gut, the better you did. The more you overcomplicated, I think John thinks this, I think John thinks that, before ever speaking to John, the more trouble you get into. So this book presents and highlights 10 common sense lessons, okay? I'll give you an example. Money follows time. The more time that the donor prospect will give you, I guarantee the more money you're going to get. That's a signal. When they give you time, and by the way, something we've learned, that time is more precious than money. You know why? You can never replace time. You can replace money with a little luck, but you can never replace time. So You know, you want to, that's part of the cultivation, is spend as much time as the donor will give you. And when they're giving you money, they're flashing a green light. You know, they want to develop the friendship. When they don't give you time, they're also flashing a red light, and maybe the future is not going to be that fertile.
Yeah, I know we didn't talk about this, but has there been a situation where someone's given you time, maybe not you personally, but you know a story where someone's given you time, and you got the yes, but then you keep talking and it turns into a no? Has that ever happened where you take advantage of that time? Because I've seen that in my industry and sales.
Not exactly, but I like to say, you know, I've been doing this for like 35 years. I've actually, on 2 occasions earlier in my career, I had parents and spouses overrule the yes I got from the donor. So that's the closest on that.
Yeah.
You know, the donor themselves. And that's a good point. You got to know who the decision makers are.
Right.
You know, is it going to be the husband, the wife, the couple together, the children? Because often, you know, the next generation, it's their money. I've seen the look. You know, I've dealt with a World War II generation person and give me a nice $50,000 gift, and then their son walks in, and I see this look of disdain, you know.
Yeah.
So you want to bring in as many of those who are going to be involved, you know, affected by the decision.
Yeah. And you followed up this book with your brand new book, How to Score Your First or Next $1 Million Gift. Tell us about this, because it's only been out a short while.
Right. It just made Amazon on November 12th. You know, we tend, in the practitioners, we do a lot of shop talk. And we talk about major gifts. We talk about leadership gifts. We talk about principal gifts. And I got to tell you, those terms mean different things to different organizations. They all hit different numbers. And even within the same organization, you know, the amount can change over the time. But I decided, when you say $1 million gift, and I realize we're in a world now of billionaires and multi-million-dollar gifts, but there's still a magic sound to $1 million gift. And it can move the needle in all those small nonprofits. It can change the way they view themselves and the way they are viewed externally completely.
Yeah. Jim, getting to know you over the years, I know how passionate you are about fundraising and training others to be effective fundraisers too. But what do you find most satisfying in the discipline of fundraising?
Well, there are a couple of things. Number one, you're really doing something for your time, as we talked about before, to touch, improve, and save more lives. You are really making the world better, okay? You know, you're not just out for your own success, but for the success of the world. And the other thing about fundraising, I think it is the most continuous improvement discipline I know of. Because whether the response is yes, no, maybe, I need more time, you are going to learn something. In fact, you know, shame on you if you don't learn something from every donor meeting and interaction. So it's an opportunity to constantly get better. And I want to make one other reference. You know, the first person to have me thinking about a career in fundraising was a giant named Red McCombs, who was a giant in every way possible, as a business, physically, as a business person, as a philanthropist. And it's funny, he stood, I think, 8 inches taller than me, and he always would call me Big Jim. And he'd go, Big Jim, you know, I had an employer leaving town, and he said, I think you should take a very close look at, I see more and more development jobs coming on the scene. And what's the great thing about development? It is the ultimate demand profession. The needs are always going to outpace the supply.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a demand for you to do more and better and build on the past.
Yeah, you know, you talked about whether they say yes, no, or don't give you an answer. those are all feedback loops, and they're going to
Right.
help you further the process down the road. And so a no is not a no. It just means
no.
maybe not right now, but
Well, we
maybe
like
soon.
to say, some of us is taught that a no means ask me again.
Yep.
But a no can have a lot of nuances. It could be, not at this time.
Mm-hmm.
It could be not in that amount. It could be not for this project. And so the last thing you want to do is write off, the friendship.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between a friendship and a relationship. I think a transactional perspective is someone says no, okay, they're out of my world. A fundraiser is an eternal optimist. We just keep on moving forward, and we are going to find a better fit.
Yeah.
And again, it is the amount, it's the purpose, and, it's the timing.
You mentioned Red McCombs and how he said there are a lot of developmental jobs out there and opportunities. For any woman, man that wants to get involved in the fundraising world or advance in their current career as a fundraiser, what is some of the best advice that you can give them?
Well, first of all, I say go for it. I mean, there's never been such a demand for, smart, creative, and entrepreneurial men and women, to enter and advance in the profession. There is great turnover. A lot of the gray hairs like me are now reaching the final chapters of their various books. So there's a great demand. And here's the exciting part, because I didn't enter the field until I was about 40 years old. But it didn't take me long to get my first $1 million gift. And, in fundraising, it's nice to have a lot of experience and all these credentials, but if you can bring in the money and demonstrate results, you are a proven fundraiser.
Yeah. Well, time has flown today. We have gotten to share some conversations that you and I have had behind the scenes out with the audience today. What are some final words you'd like to leave the audience?
Well, first of all, I want to express our appreciation again to TVSA, the city's public access station, and especially Leon Burns, who's the senior video producer, for making this project possible. I want to express our appreciation to our learning community of nonprofit leaders that includes executive directors and CEOs and directors of development and board members and volunteers. Your leadership, your passion, your service inspires everything we do, and we say a giant thank you. And we're here to work with you. The truth is, you did great work in 2024, but I got to tell you straight on, we have to do more, okay, together as a team, because the thing that concerns me is the widening gap between the haves and have-nots in our society. Those that have something, and I'm not just talking wealth, those who have health, who have education, who have technology, in addition to wealth, are getting more and more, and those that don't are falling further behind. And I think it's up to the nonprofit sector to help close this gap and make the world kinder and more equitable and more just. I want to thank you, John Largent. It's been great for you to be our Sherpa, as they say, on the journey to virtual communications. And John is not going to brag about himself. He's produced over 5,000 podcasts. And if memory serves me correctly, more men have walked the moon than have produced 5,000 podcasts. And he works with some pretty people high up the food chain. One day he called and he said, Jim, my second interview, my first interview was with Sir Anthony Hopkins. So I said, John, you're having a pretty good day. Sir Anthony Hopkins and Jim Eskin in the same day.
Well, and he said, don't call me Anthony, call me Tony. So I was like, today I'm talking with Tony and Jim. That's a good team.
Yeah, it sure is. And again, we look forward to working with you in productive and enjoyable ways in the new year. So on behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, we wish you all the best for a healthy, happy, and safe holiday season. and we appreciate what you do, and we look forward to working even more with you in 2025. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, everybody.